She always remembered everyone else's birthdays. That was the strange part. I could still picture my kitchen calendar from years ago, every square filled with careful handwriting. Red circles around my children's birthdays, blue stars for the grandchildren, little notes like bake vanilla cake or buy balloons. I never needed reminders. I remembered because I cared. So when my own birthday came and went without a single call, I noticed immediately. Not because I expected gifts or a party, but because silence has a sound when it comes from people you raised. I turned 72 that day. I woke early, as I always did, and made myself tea. The house was quiet, too quiet for a day that once meant noise, laughter, and cake crumbs on the floor. I told myself not to read into it. Mornings were busy, people worked, life moved fast. By noon, I had checked my phone more times than I cared to admit. Nothing. No message, no missed call, not even a short, "Happy birthday, Mom." I spent the afternoon doing small, ordinary things, the kind you do to keep your hands busy when your thoughts won't settle. I watered the plants, folded laundry, wiped down a counter that was already clean. Every hour I felt a little more invisible. I thought about all the birthdays I had made special for them, even when money was tight. Homemade cakes, secondhand decorations, handwritten cards filled with encouragement. I never missed one, not once. By evening, the truth settled in. They had forgotten, all three of my children, forgotten me completely. I sat at the dining table alone. The same table where we once crowded together, elbows touching, voices overlapping. I didn't cry right away. Disappointment has a way of numbing you first. I told myself stories to soften the hurt. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe tomorrow they would laugh and apologize. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern I had been ignoring for years. As night fell, my phone finally buzzed. My heart jumped, foolishly hopeful. But it wasn't a birthday message. It was a group text about logistics for the weekend. Times, addresses, who was bringing what. I read it twice before realizing they were discussing a family gathering I hadn't even been invited to yet. No mention of me, no acknowledgement of the day. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter, heavier. A realization that I had been shrinking myself for a long time, accepting less so others could take more. I turned off my phone and went to bed early, listening to the hum of the house settling around me. As I lay there in the dark, one thought kept repeating, steady and unsettling. They forgot my birthday, but they remembered my help, my money, my house. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I stopped reminding them of everything else. The next few days passed in a strange quiet. No apologies came, no late messages blaming busy schedules or crossed dates. That silence confirmed what my heart already knew. I had become an afterthought, useful only when needed. I thought back over the past decade, moments I had brushed aside because confronting them felt harder than forgiving. The times they called only when something broke, when tuition was due, when a mortgage payment came too close to the edge. I always said yes. I always found a way. The house was the center of it all. My house, the one my late husband and I bought when the children were small, when paint chips and leaky pipes didn't scare us, because we were building something together. After he passed, I kept it going alone, paid the taxes, fixed the roof, maintained the yard. When the children grew and struggled, that house became their safety net. I let one live there rent-free for years. I co-signed loans. I covered gaps without keeping score. I told myself this was what mothers did. On the fourth day after my birthday, my daughter finally called. Her voice was casual, almost cheerful, as if nothing had been missed. She spoke about traffic, about work, about a new recipe she'd tried. I waited, giving her space to remember. She didn't. Instead, she moved smoothly into why she had called. They were thinking of refinancing. There were documents they needed, questions about the deed. "You're still listed as the owner," she said lightly, like it was an inconvenience, like it was a formality that had somehow overstayed its welcome. I felt something tighten in my chest, not pain exactly, but clarity. I asked her, calmly, if she knew what day it was when she called. There was a pause, brief but telling. She laughed, a small, uncomfortable sound, and said she was sorry that time got away from her. She promised to call back later and make it up to me. Then she returned to the paperwork, to what she needed signed. After we hung up, I sat very still. The room felt different, as if it had been waiting for me to notice it. I walked through the house slowly, touching the door frames, the walls marked faintly with years of living. I realized something important then. They spoke about the house as if it belonged to all of us, but the responsibility had always been mine. The risk had always been mine. The ownership, legally and financially, was mine too. That night, I pulled out a folder I hadn't opened in years. Deeds, statements, insurance papers. Everything was exactly as I remembered. My name, my signature, my responsibility. I spread the documents across the table and felt a calm I hadn't expected. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reality. They had forgotten my birthday, but they had never forgotten what I provided. And for the first time, I allowed myself to ask a dangerous question. What if I stopped quietly carrying everything? What if I let the truth speak for itself, without reminders, without apologies? As I stacked the papers back into the folder, I understood that whatever came next would change our family forever. Not because I planned to hurt them, but because I was finally ready to stop disappearing. The following week brought an invitation, a message sent to the family group chat, cheerful and efficient, announcing a Sunday lunch at my son's place. No mention of my birthday, no acknowledgement of the days that had passed, just an assumption that I would show up, as I always did, carrying something homemade, filling the empty spaces without being asked. I stared at the message for a long time before replying with a simple, "I'll see." On Sunday morning, I chose not to bake. That alone felt rebellious. I dressed carefully, not to impress, but to feel steady in myself. When I arrived, the house was loud with conversation. They greeted me warmly enough, hugs that felt practiced, smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. I noticed how quickly the talk turned practical. Repairs, payments, plans. My grandson mentioned needing help with school fees. My son joked about how lucky they were to have me. I smiled, but inside I felt like I was watching a play I had already memorized. Halfway through the meal, the conversation shifted, as I knew it would. My son cleared his throat and spoke about the house again, about how it made sense to formalize things, about how transferring ownership would make everything easier for everyone. He said it gently, carefully, like someone explaining something obvious to a child. I waited for someone to mention my birthday to soften the moment. No one did. I set my fork down and asked a simple question. "Can you tell me what last Tuesday was?" The table went quiet. They looked at each other, confused at first, then uneasy. My daughter frowned, searching her memory. My son avoided my eyes. When no one answered, I nodded. "It was my birthday," I said. Not loudly, not angrily, just truthfully. There were apologies then. Too quick, too rehearsed. Explanations spilled out. Work stress, busy schedules, honest mistakes. I listened without interrupting. When they finished, I spoke again. I told them how it felt to be forgotten, how silence can be louder than words. I told them that love without attention becomes entitlement, that help without gratitude becomes expectation. They grew defensive. My son reminded me of everything they were juggling. He said I was being dramatic. That hurt more than the forgetting. Something in me settled then, firm and clear. I told them I would not be transferring ownership of the house. Not now, not quietly, not as if it were a favor owed. I explained that the house remained mine, legally and intentionally, and that any future decisions would be made on my terms. The reaction was immediate. Shock, anger, accusations whispered and then spoken aloud. They said I was punishing them, that I was overreacting. I didn't argue. I simply stood, thanked them for the meal, and left. In the car, my hands trembled, but my mind felt calm. For the first time, I had said no without apologizing. That evening, my phone began to ring. Calls, messages, voicemails layered with confusion and urgency. I didn't answer. I sat in my living room, surrounded by the quiet I once feared, and realized it no longer felt empty. It felt honest. They had forgotten my birthday. Now they were being reminded of something else entirely, of boundaries, of ownership, of the cost of taking someone for granted. The calls continued through the night and into the next day. I watched the phone light up from across the room, names flashing, numbers stacking into a quiet record of urgency. 50 missed calls by evening. Voicemails ranged from apologetic to irritated, some pleading, others sharp with accusation. They spoke as if I had broken an unspoken contract, as if my silence were an act of betrayal. I listened to none of them. I needed the quiet to hold onto the clarity I had found. For years, I had confused peace with compliance. Keeping everyone comfortable had become my role, even when it came at the cost of my own voice. Now, sitting alone in the house I had kept standing with my own hands, I felt the difference. This wasn't cruelty, it was self-respect. I made tea and opened the curtains, letting the morning light fall across the furniture, the photographs, the life I had built long before my children assumed it belonged to them. On the third day, my son showed up unannounced. He stood on the porch like a stranger, shifting his weight, his confidence replaced by something brittle. When I opened the door, he launched into apologies, explanations tumbling over each other. He said he hadn't meant to hurt me, that they loved me, that the house situation had just gotten complicated. I listened quietly, letting him speak until he ran out of words. Then I told him something I had never said out loud. I told him how often I had felt invisible, how birthdays forgotten were not isolated accidents, but symbols of a deeper neglect. I reminded him that love does not excuse disregard, and that gratitude cannot exist where entitlement lives. I explained that the house was not leverage, not a weapon, but a responsibility I had carried alone, one I was no longer willing to hand over simply to keep the peace. He grew frustrated. He said families shouldn't keep score. I agreed and told him that was exactly why I was done. Keeping score had exhausted me. I wasn't asking for repayment or praise. I was asking for recognition, for presence, for respect. When I told him my decision stood, his shoulders slumped. He left without another word. After he drove away, I felt the weight of what I had done settle in. This choice would change things. Holidays would feel different. Conversations would be careful, maybe strained. But beneath the uncertainty was something solid. I had chosen myself, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. I spent that afternoon doing something simple and grounding. I baked a small cake, just for me. I lit a single candle and watched it burn down, the flames steady and quiet. I realized then that my birthday had not been forgotten by accident. It had been forgotten because I had taught them they could forget me and still receive everything. That lesson was over. Whatever came next would be built on truth, not habit. And as the house settled around me that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not loneliness, but peace, earned the hard way. In the weeks that followed, the noise slowly faded. The calls became less frequent. The messages grew shorter, more cautious. Something fundamental had shifted, and everyone could feel it. I spent those weeks paying attention to my own rhythms, something I hadn't done in years. I woke without dread. I ate when I was hungry, rested when I was tired. I stopped waiting for my phone to tell me whether I mattered. My children eventually reached out again, one by one, not with demands this time, but with questions, tentative ones. They asked how I was feeling. They asked if we could talk. I agreed, but on my terms. Conversations were slower, more honest. I didn't rush to smooth over discomfort. I let pauses sit where apologies should have been. Some came, some didn't. I learned to accept both without explaining myself. One afternoon, my daughter admitted she had taken my presence for granted. She said it felt like I would always be there, steady and forgiving, no matter what. I told her that love doesn't disappear when boundaries appear. It changes shape. It grows healthier, or it withers. The choice wasn't mine alone. She cried. I didn't rush to comfort her, not because I didn't care, but because she needed to feel the weight of her own realization. The house felt different too. No longer a bargaining chip, no longer a silent promise. It was simply my home again. I tended the garden, repainted a wall, fixed a window that had rattled for years. Each small act felt like reclaiming something that had slowly slipped away. I wasn't erasing my role as a mother. I was redefining it. On a quiet morning, weeks after my birthday, I received a card in the mail. Handwritten, awkward, late. It wasn't grand, but it was real. I placed it on the table and sat with it for a long time. I understood then that forgetting my birthday had been painful, but necessary. It had revealed the imbalance I could no longer ignore. It had forced me to stop measuring love by how much I gave and start measuring it by how I was treated. I don't know what the future will look like. Families rarely snap neatly back into place. But I know this: I will never again disappear to make others comfortable. I will never again confuse silence with peace. My children are learning, slowly, that love is not automatic access and care is not ownership. As I sit in the evening light, the house quiet but full, I feel something deeper than relief. I feel whole. They forgot my birthday, yes, but in doing so, they gave me something unexpected, a reminder of who I am when I stop waiting to be remembered.